Let's queer up South Florida and Florida. Thousands defy Thunderstorms and DeSantis to show up to Stonewall Pride in drag. The Stonewall Pride Parade and Festival kicked off without any hiccups Saturday afternoon, as thousands of people braved the heat and rain to descend on Wilton Manors in rainbow umbrella hats, tutus, and t-shirts reading things like "Don't Say DeSantis" and "Drag is not a crime." Saturday's festival came exactly 1 month after Governor Ron DeSantis signed SB 1438, titled Protection of Children, legislation that prohibits anyone from knowingly admitting a child to an adult live performance. This year, Pride came with new rules: no profanity, nudity, or sexualized conduct, no items that mimic or suggest genitals. Those dressed in drag could march in the parade but not perform in public. Thousands of celebrants came dressed in partial or full drag, frequently for their first time, as a protest against the new legislation. The weather was another concern Saturday, though the event went on without an issue until the evening when a thunderstorm temporarily delayed the parade at about 7 p.m. However, the parade kicked off as usual 15 minutes later. Neither the new rules nor the weather appeared to dampen the turnout. Well, I was there, and
yes, you were.
Wet and wild, because there was a lot of rain.
Wet and wild.
More on the wet side, less on the wild side. And I was really happy to see how many people were in some sort of drag, just even if it's just a dress, a wig, because your wife, the Cuban, asked me, she says to me at one point, "I'm so surprised to see how many men are like in semi-drag." I said, "Girl, that's because..."
And she's got a shirt on that says "Drag is not a crime."
Right, I'm like, "Girl, read your shirt." It's because it's a...
Read the shirt that Faye put on you.
She said, oh, now I get it. I'm like, yeah, girl, now I get it. I wanted to comment one thing about the "Don't Say DeSantis." I don't understand that phrase, because by the virtue of the phrase itself, you're saying the very thing you're saying "don't say." I don't understand that phrase. Don't say, and then you say it. I don't understand that.
No, my favorite shirt is that you don't even have to say it, right? My favorite shirt it said DeSantis, and then it had a middle finger. Like plain and simple, to the point, right? Yeah. I love that. And I love that people, like they heard us when we said show up, right? When we said suit up and show up, rain didn't stop people. I got a couple of texts from people like, "Oh, is it still raining there? Oh, I've got, maybe I won't go." But then it was like, no, I'm going. Like, people still showed up. The rain did not stop many people. I mean, there was a slew of people out there, and when the parade was going, we could see people as far as the eye can see, Al, and then they didn't care if they were getting a little wet. There
were two things that I really noticed when because I was covering it for Out South Florida and Outclick magazine, and I will tell you, and of course here, I'm bringing my knowledge here. First, it was about not just about drag, it was about including and recognizing and standing up for our trans brothers and sisters. Trans Inclusive Group and Ariana's Center got together to show unity in the trans community, and all wrote a float together at saying that, and they told me that it is more important than ever that just the trans community come together, because we give everybody else someone and something to rally around, which I thought was very poignant too. While the turnout was a lot less than last year, there was still a good crowd, and there were a lot of people that came into town for it. I went in to a lot of businesses. I went into Tropics, I went into Wag Pride, which was a pet store, several other bars and restaurants. They were seeing tons of new faces. Like people who came in just for this, and the weather was not going to deter them, because by the time they get down from Atlanta or Sarasota or whatever, they were here for it. And a lot of new people coming in, and business owners were very heartened by that. And I think that's a really good sign for the Wilton community.
I want to ask real quickly, do we think that the drag protest for Stonewall Pride was successful?
No.
Just briefly.
Well, successful in what regard? Meaning
however you would define success. Were you satisfied with it, that it was successful?
Well, I think it's preaching to the choir kind of thing.
And I also don't think there was a big enough presence or stance or statement made, at least from my perspective. And again, I wasn't near you at the stage to hear other conversations. We did, like John was saying, we had a lot of people that were in town for the parade or for Pride, and we had the conversation about coming to Florida, and the importance of being here to show
a lot about it on the stage.
Like how important that is and stuff. So I had very mixed feelings about the way the day went, but I thought it was extremely successful overall. I just wish there'd been more of a protest.
Yeah, another question that I'm curious from y'all's standpoint. Do you think we overreacted to DeSantis and the fears and all of the fears that were churning in the last month? Do you think there was an overreaction to it that really we didn't need to be as fearful as what we were hearing?
We won't know for a couple weeks, because DeSantis and his people were never going to come down and arrest anybody in drag. What we have to wait for is if any of his Moms for Liberty or his minions, Twitter warriors, if they come in, if they find a gotcha moment, if someone was adjusting themselves just because they itched, not because they were being sexual, but it was captured in a picture, or if some kind of offending video. That's going to happen at 2 o'clock on some Tuesday afternoon. So we won't really know if we overreacted for a couple of weeks yet.
So these people are looking all over TikTok and et cetera, and Instagram to see what kind of stories they can find to bitch about.
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
Or sending, or the Moms for Liberty were in the crowd, and then they will send things to the Department of Professional Business Regulation, which basically circumvents a legal process and just says, nope, we don't like it, you're out of here.
I mean, I think that makes sense. But to your question, no, I don't think it's an overreaction. I mean, I think that there's nothing to do now but to overreact, because the stuff is getting really real, what's happening.
Yeah.
So we have to react, and really dramatically, I believe.
Last question. Are we glad that Stonewall Pride is over?
I mean, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you.
No, it's just, I mean, it's a wonderful unifying day. And you see a lot of people that you haven't seen in a long time, and it poured and it rained and people were still out there,
No, wait. I don't mean in terms of the actual we're tired or we're sleepy or it was a lot of work. I mean just the anxiety of doing this in June.
Yes.
Are we happy?
Because I was worried about security. I was worried about some crazy maniac wanting to hurt our community and coming in with God knows what. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I quickly felt better when I saw the first security point. Yeah. There were security options everywhere. There was undercover people. There was just a lot of police presence. And I, for one, felt safe.
Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
What did you think about starting the parade with the largest contingency of BSO that I have ever seen associated with LGBT?
I was very impressed.
Were all in.
By the vehicles coming from surrounding cities, by the fire people that were there, the people walking. Seeing the police presence supporting our community by walking with our community and just being friendly the entire day. I mean, I didn't meet one officer that was not a guardian at rent-a-cop, but the real officers, they could not have been nicer and more supportive of our community.
Many jurisdictions were represented. There was, I think I saw Coral Springs,
Yeah.
I just randomly spoke with one just on my way home when I was walking home. He was SWAT from Fort Lauderdale, and I said, anything weird go on or anything? He's like, no, nothing ever happens here. And he intimated, did not say, but he intimated that it's more, he's there to protect us from outside threats than drunks, walking out of a bar. And just before we went on air, I got an email from Wilton Manors Police Chief Gary Blocker. He said there were no arrests made over the weekend in relation to the Stonewall Festival.
No,
It's very much the same like in Miami.
A couple of highlights. First off, I congratulate Faye. We did a great job.
You both did a great job.
Frankly,
You really
on the
did.
stage. We did 2 hours of interviews. We interviewed lots of the major big points in community that you would want to talk about before a Pride Parade in Stonewall and Wilton and Fort Lauderdale, etc. I congratulate David Hopkins. The best pictures of Stonewall Pride are his. He's the one that was in the parade. So when you watch our broadcast, the pictures that in the parade are completely different than the pictures standing on the side of the parade. And interesting, before it's done, more people will have watched the parade based on our broadcast than attended the parade, which is always, that's a great sign. So you're going to double dramatically the number of people that see Stonewall from it. A couple of highlights that I want to mention. We began the broadcast with Dean Trentalis, the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, and Lady Vote. And Chris Caputo is commissioner of Wilton Manors, in protest in drag. The two of them talking together, I thought, was a powerful way to begin the broadcast. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was as clear on the politics of the importance of the time period as I think both of us would agree that we've ever heard her say. I've heard her for years. I have never heard her crystallize what is really going on and why right now is so important. And I think that's important because we always go, it's the election of a lifetime. It's the election of a lifetime. It's like, please shut up. Except now.
You're right.
You're right now. The other thing I think was interesting is drag queens there were lots of protests. I have heard estimates between 1,000 and 3,000 people in some versions of drag came to the parade. If that's true, there's never been a larger collection of drag queens anywhere.
Yeah, but our queens were subdued, Al, and I could see them. Like I could see my girls, my favorite girls, right? Like Kelly Raspberry and all those other girls.
They were nervous.
Kimberly Venom and Shasta McNasty, like Velvet. You can tell that they're standing there. They're not moving. They're not going like this with the audience. Like they were afraid to be who they usually are because of this.
Yeah.
And that saddened me.
Yeah, I made a joke that we were really excited. It was right before the parade, and we were really excited to announce that a new Grand Marshal was going to participate. And Governor DeSantis was here, and he was going to open the parade. And the joke was not only not funny to the crowd, okay, wow. I'll accept that, but the comments that were said about him were literally shocking to me. I heard more verbal language observation on him than I've ever heard.
Just say it. You heard F DeSantis over and over. People would walk by the stage and look at us and scream it.
And scream it just so they were hoping
and
to
the
be heard.
conversations in our restaurant and in front of the restaurant were the same thing. Everybody was talking about our state of, it wasn't just our normal pride. We were out there to get drunk, to do whatever you want to do. There was a political underlying of everything that happened that day.
And what's interesting to me about this in terms of going through this Stonewall is Trump was hated in the Wilton Manors community, but nothing like what I felt yesterday. If the weather would have been good and 50 to 60,000 would have been there, it would have, I think, been overwhelming in reaction to him. Last thing that I thought was super interesting, Dean Trentalis, I asked, sitting next to Lady Vote, Chris Caputo, I said, you know what, use y'all's crystal balls and what's going to happen. And Dean Trentalis said, absolutely, no, I know he has vested interest to say this, but it was the first time I've heard this. He said that DeSantis is going to pull out of the presidential election by the third, fourth, or fifth primary, because he's not going to be able to sell Florida in Iowa, in New Hampshire, or in South Carolina. And as a result, money is going to pour out of the potential of the fundraising that he needs in February and March of 24. And I thought that that was super interesting. And he has a very good point, that this hate culture that he is whipping up is doing great here in Florida and in Texas, but he probably is going to have dramatic difficulty exporting it to other places. We hope that that is true. We will watch, but we will see. We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show from Happening Out Television Network. In the model of PBS and NPR, we educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of the LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the stories going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.